No. In which case, minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of March have been circulated. There were only three of us present, myself, Councillor Fuller and Councillor Shura. Do I have a proposer for those minutes? Councillor Fuller, seconded by Councillor Shura. All those in favour? Right. So we're on to the actual planning applications. Those of you who have looked at my report will notice that it does not follow the order on the agenda, because I think I looked at these in the order in which I seem to find them as they came through, which meant that all the Apollo House stuff went first. But we'll stick to the agenda order, and that makes Denbourne Riverside Close the first application.
Can I just say, it's I don't know if it's an interest or not. I know the house very well because it's got new owners who I don't know at all.
Right.
So
does what they propose have any bearing on your own property?
No, it doesn't at all.
I think we can note it, but I'm not really sure it's even another interest, but thank you for drawing that to our attention. So, single story rear extension, side extension over the garage, remove the front canopy roof and replace with a smaller alteration to the front facade, insulation render to all walls, new solar PV panels, replacement doors and fenestration to dwelling. Which sounds relatively comprehensive. I think that if you look at the elevations existing to start with, because although it describes it as elevations existing and floor plan, I think it has the elevations shown on it. So if we look, so there's your front elevation, and you can see how it vaguely looks from there. Garage on what is our left-hand side as looking at it with twin doors, no solar panels on the roof, and you'll see the entrance treatment. If we look at the next one for proposed, so what we now see is that the double door arrangement for the garage has been replaced with a single up and over type door. But what we can also see is that they've added a room over the top of the garage, which has windows that match the existing structure. For some reason, the roof level is slightly lower on the extension than it is on the main property. But we can also see, looking at it from the front, so in effect from Riverside Close, you get a battery of solar panels on the roof. There are none on the rear of the property, presumably on the basis that that front catches more sunshine than does the rear.
It's south facing.
Yeah. Clue may be in the fact it says south elevation as well. And to some extent, that almost sums it up. You'll notice there's a couple of small roof lights as well on the rear elevation that you can pick up on. And you'll notice the slightly different treatment to the front porch area. That essentially is it. I think I had sort of set out a little bit what it looks like internally within the notes. When I looked at it, there weren't any public comments on the portal, and Highways had no observations or objections, and the Environment Agency had expressed no concern. Given the size of the properties down Riverside Close, I can't see any obvious issues with it, let's put it that way. I think I'm right in saying that the window that you can see at first floor level on the proposed west view, the top one, is, I think, an obscured glazed window. So I think that actually is part of an ensuite, if I remember rightly. Thoughts, comments, problems?
No problems. Happy with it?
Anybody got any issues with it?
No.
I think that's probably
No, I mean, with anything it doesn't show, and I don't think it really has any. The problem is it's a very, very sloping down to the house garden at the back. So there isn't as much space at the back as you might think in terms of
right. Is there, can we look at the site plan
yeah,
for a minute?
if you extend at the back, you've
Probably the-
almost got to the bottom part of the slope of the garden.
Not perhaps the easiest
No, you get it in the middle.
to kind of figure out.
But is that a problem?
I don't
think it is.
I don't see it as an issue.
No?
They might have a problem with water running off, but then that's what you get.
Presumably that's what your
Right against
architect's
the hill,
going
and they'll sort that out, won't they?
to look at. After all, if there is a problem, it'll affect the property rather than anything else, I anticipate.
Yeah.
I don't have any objection.
No, I don't.
I think that's a no objection all round then. Which moves us on to 1 Athena Way, application for a single-storey side extension and garage conversion. This one may seem vaguely familiar, and the reason it may seem vaguely familiar is that we've already looked at an application previously. Back in 22, an application for a single-storey side extension to the kitchen and loft extension over the garage got planning permission in September. And we had said, I think I might have got the dates the wrong way around, because our comments seem to be after the date of the planning permission, which I don't think it was. But we had no objection, but we had some worries about traffic issues in East Road and had requested a suitable construction management plan was put in place. And councillors will note that condition 4 of the previously granted planning permission did, coupled with condition 5, effectively have both a construction management plan and, perhaps importantly, a condition which said the garage conversion hereby permitted shall only result in the loss of 1 garage parking space. The remaining single garage space shall be retained along with the 3 external parking spaces on the driveway in front of the existing garage, which is interesting because the new application does away with both the garages and incorporates, as it were, the whole thing into the structure. So, in essence, if NNC grant planning permission for this, they will, in a sense, have backtracked on what they were saying less than 3 years ago in granting it. And I think that's probably the issue. If you simply took the application at face value, as you were without the knowledge of the previous planning permission, would we have worried? Because the applicant says, well, look, there are still 3 parking spaces, just not including a garage space anymore. Strangely, NNC Highways' response was to say that it couldn't support the application in its present form and seeks clarification about the on-site off-street parking and access. I don't really know why it said that, because there aren't any changes to the access. And the application is quite explicit, it seems to me, in saying there are these 3 spaces in front of the property, which aren't in any way impacted by what it's seeking. So I don't really get why NNC Highways have said that. If they'd said something about the loss of the garage space given the previous planning permission, I could have understood it. But that wasn't their comment.
Right.
Yeah,
They're supposed to measure 3 metres by 5.5.
yes.
I've not ever seen 3 cars on that driveway when I've walked past at night, ever.
No, I mean, of course,
But they've got big cars and it's small, yeah.
So it's not 3 metres by 5.5.
I don't
Well,
think so.
it's difficult to see because they don't give us the dimensions of the parking spaces. It merely says there are 3 parking spaces. So that could be a further concern. But then planning permission was granted the first time around, but perhaps NNC Highways took the view that 1 could be in the garage, 2 could be outside. It therefore serviced 3, and 3 would be enough for the property given the size of it, even with the extension. But now we lose the garage space. It perhaps makes the issue of the 3 external spaces more critical, in addition to the lack of the garage.
Well, it does. They've got to go somewhere.
There is a car park nearby, long-term car. Is that right?
Well, there is, of course, the long-stay car park just almost round the corner, so to speak. But then do we really want people using the long-stay car parking
Personal car.
as their personal car
Oh,
parks?
yeah.
So I wouldn't really want to encourage that.
No, I agree with you. I'm not happy.
I mean, my instinct would be to say that, unlike the last time, we should actually object to this application on the grounds that, A, it had been considered necessary for the garage to be retained when permission is granted for an earlier scheme, and this doesn't retain it. And secondly, we have concerns that although the applicant claims there are 3 spaces, we're not at all sure that it would meet NNC Highways
Indeed.
requirements for those 3 spaces.
Yeah.
I'm happy with that.
I think we're all, so we object on that basis.
It's not good getting a clue from NNC Highways anyway,
All very curious.
which is good.
The next one is yet another extension. However, my note about it is very short because there's really not a lot to say about it. This is 115 Glapthorne Road. According to the application, the extension walls will be of sandstone brick to match the existing. Roof tiles will also match the existing ones, with a window in white UPVC, again to match existing windows. And essentially what this does is relocate the kitchen, creating a new kitchen diner and getting rid of the utility room and study, and relocating the WC. Essentially, it's a pretty substantial revision of the ground floor of the property from as it was to as it would be. But in terms of impact on any neighbouring properties, there doesn't appear to be any. Access isn't affected, parking isn't affected. I can't see any obvious issues with it.
No,
No.
I agree.
So I think that was the existing.
Yeah.
And
I don't think it's anything we can realistically object to.
No, anything with there is the car park, but they're not changing it, so.
yeah,
With the super crossing things there.
so I mean, nobody seems to have any real worries about that one at all. So we'll call that a no objection as well. Sorry, I should just have said, actually, going back to the one we just looked at, One Athena Way, I suppose we should repeat what we said about the need for the construction management plan and say that condition, the same as condition 4 on the original one that we needed.
Absolutely.
Most definitely.
I overlooked that. So that brings us to Apollo House. This is one of those properties, it kind of rivals York House in West Street. I think try and see who can get the most planning applications in for a single property. Because its new owners seem to be going pretty much to town with this building. And we have, in essence, 2 separate applications. And at first sight, I looked at it and thought, well, this is strange. How come we got an LBC application for the first bit, not for the second one? And then I thought about it a bit more and thought, well, hang on a minute. Apollo House isn't a listed building in the first place. Why is there an LBC application? Well, in a sense, it all becomes clear when you start to look into it. Because Apollo House has a redundant chimney, which is currently affixed to the chimney of the courthouse, which is a listed building, by a metal bracket. Goodness only knows how long that situation has existed.
Which holding it up?
What they want to do is simply take the chimney away. And there's quite a lot of documentation around it. But in essence, and I think Lisa is into one of the documents, which I think if we can get through all of this, so there's a site plan. But if we keep going, all becomes a little bit clearer. I think. Yeah, there we are. So there is the courthouse, oops, and Apollo House, and you can see that effectively Apollo House butts up to the courthouse. But if you look at, there's another one which shows this chimney better. I think it's that one actually.
Just see the strap there.
Oh yeah, there, that's it. So the plan is simply to get rid of the chimney. And they've sought listed building consent on the basis that it's attached to a listed building. And what they say is, look, this has got to be done quite carefully because we don't want to damage the listed building. Bearing in mind that the council owns said listed building, I think we're probably pretty confident they don't damage the property. And there may be a case for whether the estates management committee should get involved in this, liaising with the developer, assuming it gets planning permission, to make sure that it is done in a way that we're happy with. Though that strikes me, we could end up then wanting some sort of an expert's report ourselves, which doubtless we'd end up having to pay for. Councillor Chesson.
Has it at any time been part of the courthouse setup?
This chimney?
Yes, because,
Not as far as I'm aware.
right,
I can't find anything. when it was agreed.
The
that they
materials
would scrap
are completely
their
different.
2 hours. I've got
So I mean, it was trapped.
It probably was done before we owned the courthouse.
quite possible.
I should think it goes back
Yeah,
a long, long way.
yeah.
And it wasn't something that we picked up on at that time, or at least if we did, I don't remember picking up on it.
Should we have to have some sort of inspection to make sure that our chimney's not going to fall down if it gets taken off?
Well, this is exactly why I said I think the Estates Management Committee need to get involved in this. Councillor Fuller, then Councillor Shearer.
Why do they want to remove the chimney?
Essentially, it doesn't do anything. And secondly, they think it would look better without it being there.
No, it's just, no, I did my little one.
I mean, they're
They've got
in
to
terms
do
of
it
planning
as well,
advantage,
haven't they? So,
they just say, look, it will smarten it up. Councillor Shearer.
I don't think we should object. In fact, if anything, I think we should encourage it on the basis that it will probably actually help our property if it is taken down. The fear is that it will actually either fall at some stage either onto our roof or their roof. So the sooner it's taken down, the better, in my mind. And also, you have no idea what might be going down in that gap behind the chimney. So I would encourage it being taken down. If permission is granted and the work proceeds, I also agree with you, Chair, that then probably estates ought to oversee it from the courthouse perspective, i.e. ownership of the courthouse perspective.
Yeah, so I think in terms of the planning application, I don't think we have any objection to it. But I do think that it will be important for estates to be fully appraised of this.
Oh, absolutely. But let's
And
wait for it
stick
to be
on top of
passed
it,
first.
assuming that it gets its permission. So we'll keep an eye on this space really for that. The second application concerning the same building is described as renovation stroke renewal and extension of roof. And again, there are some drawings which make things perhaps relatively easy to spot.
Oh, yeah.
If I can remember which ones we're looking at.
Yeah.
So I think if we look at is there an elevation existing? Yes, there must be an elevation existing somewhere.
elevation proposed.
Just proposed. Floor plans existing?
Oh,
I must admit, I've forgotten where it appears, but
So it wants to start.
that's definitely not what we're interested in. No, forget that one. I tell you what, there are two that say elevation proposed. Let's have a look at both of those. It may be that
Before and after. So change there.
yeah.
right. My recollection is, I think this is the proposed one, because I think that we're talking about this bit of roofing here. And what I can't remember is whether that's the existing, and in the end it's going to be over to there. So that we can get hold of another one.
This one here.
Let's try the next one and see if that makes it clearer. Oh, yes, there we go. So here is the new bit of roofing. And in essence, it looks mainly as a cosmetic job.
Yeah.
To make that south elevation look slightly tidier than it does.
Looks more balanced.
Exactly that. And I think that's pretty much the way the applicant seeks to put it.
Oh, there's the existing, I think.
Right, there you go.
Two.
Yeah. I knew there was one way you could see this more clearly. So there you go.
Yep, that's perfect. Just make it balanced.
It doesn't impinge on the courthouse in any way.
It doesn't affect the courthouse in any way, it seems to me. It is not a listed building. It is a building of, quote, townscape merit, which is a category of building as referred to in the conservation area document, which, as we all know, is extremely out of date. And I think it is. It's a significant building in the town, even if it isn't listed. But I can't see any reason to object to it at all. Goodness only knows what all of that is going to cost them. But given what we seem to be spending on this property anyway, if it gets it to what they want it to be, I suspect it's going to look quite good. Anybody got any issues?
No.
No. So, no objection to both of those. Really just on the agenda by way of information, because if you're talking about discharges, conditions, all they're basically saying to the planners is, look, you impose certain conditions on us and we've now met them. And doubtless if NNC think that they haven't, they'll sort it out between themselves. So they're just there by way of information. And the planning outcomes, well, there were only two, and we didn't have any objections and both were granted. No planning appeals either. So that takes us through all the planning applications per se. The next item on the agenda deals with the meeting with Lee Barron. And I circulated a brief report on the meeting that I had with him in here on the 28th of March. Essentially, the main purpose of it was to say that we're banging our head against a brick wall in terms of trying to get any engagement with NNC planning in relation to the possibility of trying to get a new neighbourhood plan off the ground. And given that we've tried various avenues, could you help us, please? He seemed quite keen on the idea of neighbourhood plans, and he certainly seemed willing enough to try and contact the planning department. That, of course, was some 3 weeks or so ago now. I've not heard anything more from him or from the planning department. I suspect that what we could do is just a follow-up email with him saying that I've reported back to this meeting on the fact that we had that, and has he got any update for us? And as and when, and if he has anything, could he let us know? Whilst he was here, I took the opportunity to speak to him about one or two other things. So we discussed the state of play at NNC planning generally, which he seemed to be pretty aware of, saying that it was a problem, although I did feel that it was right that I flagged that when we had the issues with the new Turkish restaurant at the old post office and said, oh, we think there's a planning enforcement issue here, they jumped to it pretty quickly. More of that in a minute in another context. Then I sort of slightly belaboured him about Section 106 agreement. Because at the point of a Section 106 agreement, is to plough things back into the local area affected by the planning application, you would think there ought to be at least some sort of statutory duty for the relevant town or parish council to be involved in the whole process, which there isn't. So I asked him to reflect on that. And again, I think if we're going to do a follow-up to him, ask him whether he is proposing to do anything, or has in fact done it, or has he raised it with any of his colleagues in government. I'd also suggested, alongside of that, a little bit of the sort of usual bugbear that we do occasionally see retrospective planning applications. It strikes me that it would be a way of raising some extra money if you charged an additional fee, and raising even more money if you charged an additional fee if it was a retrospective planning application for a listed building. It did strike me that even if nothing else got taken forward, the fact that I was suggesting to the government a way of raising more money might conceivably result in something. We'll wait and see. And of course, the final thing in my note was the whole question of infrastructure in Oundle. I pointed out that with 3 major developments, all with planning permission, 2 of which have pretty well started and 1 of which was about to be started, that we were concerned that the infrastructure just wasn't keeping pace. He referred to the recent meeting he'd had in this building, which Councillor Reichhold told us about. He seems well aware of it. I'd emphasised the fact that we felt as a council that a second surgery ultimately was probably the answer, and that it was somewhat worrying that we faced the prospect of significantly further development in coming years without the slightest sign of any infrastructure to accompany it. So a useful half an hour or so with him. I must admit, I'd convinced myself he was not about to turn up when he arrived at the very last minute, to such an extent that I'd run my wife at home and said, could you just check my emails and see if there's anything about him being delayed or anything else? And he pitched up at that point. What was also slightly surprising is that we sat here with a local member of the constabulary, presumably in case I was so incensed by what he said that I attacked the MP. It was quite interesting to see that he felt the need to have security present.
Security everywhere.
Even in those circumstances. So that was the meeting with Lee Barron. I hope you'll agree that we just follow up with it.
So what can anything come out of it?
Well, at the moment, the short answer is no, not that I'm aware of, which is why I think we should do a follow-up now and say, well, look, I've reported back to the committee. We had that meeting 3 weeks ago. Is there anything that you can tell us? Have you managed to speak to anybody at NNC Planning? Because I'd be quite interested if he says, yes, I have,
Yeah.
and silence continues to reign. Of course, by the time we meet again, there will have been an election, and there will be 3 new councillors. One of them may or may not be a returning councillor, but the other 2 definitely won't be returning ones. And it strikes me that one of the early things that we could do as a committee is to engage with whoever is elected all over again, and stress how we would want to work with them and with NNC in these kind of areas, and just see what comes of it.
I was going to raise this under AOB, but it's relevant now. We saw a planning application for a change to the boundary of Slot Meadows in January, which is in my backyard. But it was put into NNC planning on December 24th, now nearly April the 24th, and the entire building site is waiting on the visit from the planning officer. And then we've got one who can visit.
So,
So on that basis, your concerns about the staffing
Yeah.
seem.
As you know, I also wear a second hat as a councillor in Clapthorne. And Clapthorne put in an application for a paddle court on their playing field in September last year. And the current estimate is that they may go to decision in June, which is 9 months for an application that's supposed to take 8 weeks. I mean, it simply isn't good enough. And if they are that badly understaffed, then our new councillors need to be saying, you've got to put some extra staffing into that department because they can't meet their statutory requirements, let alone do anything kind of helpful and proactive.
Because the Titchmarsh traps and stuff has gone for inspection, isn't it? Because they haven't responded to that within 3 years.
Yeah, that's another sign of things that have gone badly wrong. We did, of course, get involved recently, well, I say recently, not that long ago, in certain comments about an application at the other end by Peterborough Services, which is all kind of part and parcel of this whole issue about developments off the A605 at both ends. Moving on to any other relevant matters, I did circulate a couple of other things prior to the meeting. One of them was an email that I'd sent to Lisa about a large sign that had appeared for the Amble Walks development outside the riverside, because I looked at it and thought, well, that's odd. I'm sure that there should have been a planning application for this. I know it's not in the parish, but given where it is, I'm surprised we weren't notified about it. But I thought, well, it's just the fact that we weren't notified about it. So I then started looking through the planning applications for Ashton and could see absolutely no sign that permission had been sought or granted, which sort of led to me flagging it with Lisa. Lisa promptly flagged it to NNC, and NNC have said, oh, there should have been an application. We'll open a file. Whether they'll get beyond open a file, I don't know, but it is a little worrying that developers seem to think that they can just erect what they want, where they want, in terms of advertising material for their developments, when there is a whole string of regulations about what you can and can't do with advertising and what consents you need. So we've flagged that one. And the final one, which Lisa's put up, is this community storage facility. I got approached on the basis of somebody saying to me, oh, there's a development off Stoke Dore Road. When there's a Section 106 agreement for that, it would be really nice if we could have X, Y, and Z. And I said, well, the problem with that is that the Section 106 agreement's already done and dusted, as it was for all the other developments. But I did make the point that we could flag it with NNC potentially for future issues as being something for which there is a demand. And that's what got me thinking a little bit about the sort of whole Section 106 thing again. The particular group currently rent a storage facility in town. It's barely big enough, and it is under threat, if I could put it that way. Their difficulty is that they, I think, pay next to nothing for where they've got it. And if they have to pay a lot of money for a storage facility, is that much less for doing the charitable works that they do. But it kind of raised an issue around whether or not, as a council, and I appreciate this is going well beyond the remit of this committee, but it sort of started off as to do with the Section 106. But if there is demand for a storage facility, is there some way in which we can meet that demand? I'm not convinced that we've got any land on which we could put something, and even if we could, the question is, what do we put and at what sort of cost? I mean, I'm conscious of what we've done out there with the storage unit, but really not sure. So I kind of flagged it to us because of the Section 106 thing, but I think it's really a matter for essentially full council stroke estates rather than for us, other than the Section 106 element. Councillor Shearer.
I'm kind of curious as to who the local organisation is.
I can tell you. I didn't put it in the thing.
You don't need to tell me, but what I can tell you is that Creative Arundel hire storage facilities just off the bypass, the new smart box or whatever it's called. And we pay £85 a month. And we'd much rather not pay £85 a month. The point is that if you need storage, well, you have to pay for it, whether you're charity or not. And of course, that includes insurance. And the problem is if you have a community storage facility, the insurance is going to get incredibly complicated.
Yeah, could be right.
Well, I agree
Yes.
absolutely with everything you said. There are quite a lot of organisations around who would like some very cheap storage. And there is storage, the units that we used to rent in the, down East Road.
Yeah,
They're still vacant.
I did mention those,
Yep.
but I fear that if they're not careful, they'll spend most of their time fundraising in order to pay storage costs.
Yeah.
I agree. That's difficult. But
It's sad
so,
because there we are, there's two organisations in terms of Creative Arundel and this one,
yeah.
as a minimum, who might be interested. But there are all sorts of practical and other issues. I think it's just something I'd like maybe to take forward into council in due course.
GNS have that store next to QVH. I'm not really quite sure on what basis that.
Somewhere back in the mists of time, they wanted to store items close to where they would be used. And at that point, there was nothing there. And that passageway in essence, doesn't go anywhere. So my understanding of matters, but this is many, many, many moons ago, was that the council gave permission to GNS to put the structure up and then keep their stuff in it. Technically speaking, the land, which the council believed was it, is what counts, not actually the structure on it. As a matter of law, if you buy and sell sort of land stroke property, it's the land you're selling, not what's built on it. Which always seems a bit strange because obviously you've got to pay a lot more for a plot which has got a nice house on it than a plot that is just a plot. But anyway, that's the way it works. So technically speaking, the feeling was that the store was owned by the council, but in a sense, because GNS had funded its construction and so on, and it was built for their use, and it was not an issue for the council. The council was more than happy to simply accommodate it. In more recent years, very recently, we've actually put some power into it, and slightly more recently, as we've sought to register our ownership of the QBH with the land registry, certain issues have arisen, shall we say, which are in the process of being as dealt with as they can be.
I guess what I'm saying is that, you know, the idea is a sound one, having a community storage facility. I just worry that it opens up a huge can of worms.
Where are you going to put it?
I think historically, looking back, we had the chapel in the graveyard, the
You're right.
cemetery, that was also storage.
The chapel
maybe-
was used for
yes.
storage, but of course we sold the chapel off for
Absolutely.
residential development and lost that storage area because the museum used to store stuff up.
Yeah, and I think historically, times have changed in that storage space has become worth money now, whereas at one time it wasn't.
Well, as I say, we pay £85 a month.
Yeah,
A month.
yeah.
It's a lot.
And it's a tiny space. I mean, it's basically from about here to the wall. Yeah, that's it. £85 a month.
Yeah.
80 cubic metres.
Yeah, I think that's the reality.
Well, there we are.
now. Space is money.
I kind of floated it with us mainly because from a planning issue, it was to do with a section 106, an existing 106 and 106s in general. On a wider perspective, it's something for the kids, which may take Councillor Shearer's view that there are just so many issues, not least of which, of course, is do we actually have any land on which something like that could be situated anyway. But there we are. So that's everything that I think I wanted to raise by way of any other business. Councillor Cheshire, packing up your papers already. I think the answer probably means no.
I don't have anything.
Councillor Shearer?
No.
Councillor Clark?
I was going to ask the question you asked about that sign at the roundabout.
Yes, I saw your email.
Just thinking about what you said, there's also two very large ones at the end of Ashton Road.
Yes, there
They
are.
have got planning.
The short answer is I don't think so.
And there's a small one at the other end of Ashton Road now, which has been concreted in. It's a much smaller version of the same thing. So could we add those to the question?
Where are they? Sorry?
One of them, you know where the footpath bit of Ashton Road, it's the sort of crossing over towards the North Meadows.
Yeah.
There's two massive
Who's
ones
in
there.
charge of it?
Signs of what?
Suddenly
What they
comes
show.
Yes, I'm
second
sure.
one.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
And
three.
there's a mini version,
Well, we ought to
near the
know.
roundabout between East Road and Ashton Road.
Yeah.
Which is being
East. Oh, yeah, East Road and Ashton Road. Okay, I'll go and have a look, take some pictures.
Yeah. And I suppose all I can say to that one is, well, thank you for your vigilance. If we do spot these sort of things, you know, make sure that Lisa is informed. She can A, check her own records, and B, as it were, knows who to contact. Of course, the problem is that we then lose control after we've actually done that. And I mean, there is, I seem to recall there's still an issue about something on the river from a very long time ago. As far as I know,
It's
we're just,
still ongoing.
just getting no feedback as to what, if anything, is being done about anything. Councillor Fuller. With about 50 minutes or so on the clock, I think that concludes the business, which is, I think, in essence, the last business of the present council. However, four of us round this table are, as it were, already elected. And the person to my left has indicated, possibly because her arm was twisted, a wish to be co-opted back onto the council. So with a bit of luck, we'll all meet again at the end of May.
Thank you.
And I'll declare the meeting closed.
Thank you.
Lovely.